What do a pair of pearls from a baby's christening, small garnet earrings on a British mountain peak, and a historic tiara the world hadn't seen in exactly 20 years have in common? These jewels cannot tell us exactly what Catherine was thinking during the most difficult period of her life. But if we place them in the order she chose them, a deeply moving picture emerges. Her return to royal duties was incredibly measured, and so were her jewelry choices. During her hardest days, she reached for pieces that told a very different story than royal diamonds. And when it was finally time to take her place at state banquets again, her choices surprised many. Let's look inside Catherine's jewelry box to see which pieces she kept close during her recovery, what gave her strength as she took her first public steps, and how, step by step, the magnificent scale of her jewels finally returned. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. First, we need to return to June 2024, when the world was waiting to see her again. Her appearance at Trooping the Color was her first in public since she had revealed that March that she was undergoing treatment for cancer. The ceremony itself could hardly have been grander. Regiments in full dress, carriages, crowds lining the mall, and the royal family gathered on the Buckingham Palace balcony. Every camera seemed to be searching for her. Catherine wore the Irish Guards brooch, an important part of her role as colonel of the regiment. Beside that official emblem, however, was a far more personal choice: the Cavalfiore earrings by Cassandra Goad. Each earring is formed from 7 pearls clustered with small diamonds. Their name means cauliflower in Italian, and the designer was inspired by young cauliflower stalks she saw in a Sicilian market. It is not the origin story one expects at Trooping the Color, and perhaps that is why I like it. Royal jewelry can begin with something as ordinary as vegetables on a market stall. More importantly for Catherine, these were not new earrings chosen especially for her return. She had first worn them in 2018 for the christening of Prince Louis. They later appeared at the Chelsea Flower Show, at Easter services, and on Remembrance Sunday. Her sapphire engagement ring was also back on her hand. So, although the circumstances had changed completely, the jewelry was already part of her life. Their history is enough. On a day unlike any she had faced before, Catherine wore pieces that had accompanied family celebrations and familiar royal occasions, giving the public a recognizable image of her without pretending that everything was as it had been. A month later, the atmosphere changed. Catherine entered the royal box at Wimbledon and received a long standing ovation. This was not a military parade or a formal act of remembrance. It was one of the places where she has always looked most naturally at ease, following the match, reacting to every point, and speaking to the players afterwards. Her jewelry changed with the setting. The clustered pearls and regimental brooch were gone. Instead, she wore the light, rounded Sabine earrings by Pariah, made in gold, and 2 Halcyon Days bangles. One of those bangles was the same one she had worn to Wimbledon the previous year. That small repetition matters more than an elaborate theory would. A familiar bracelet, contemporary earrings, and the ritual of returning to the royal box were quite enough. But while many people were watching her face that summer, jewelry observers soon began looking at her left hand. In August, Catherine and William appeared in a video congratulating Team Great Britain after the Paris Olympics. The large sapphire engagement ring was absent. In its place was a slim band set with alternating light and dark stones. The same ring appeared in the family film released in September when Catherine announced that she had completed chemotherapy. It was still understated, still difficult to identify from the available images, and still being worn instead of the famous sapphire. That was all the invitation the newspapers needed. Was she retiring Diana's engagement ring? Had its absence been intended as a statement about her marriage? Had the new ring marked the end of treatment? The theories arrived almost before anyone had managed to obtain a clear photograph. We will examine the ring properly in a moment, because it eventually became part of something much more interesting than a simple replacement. For now, it is enough to notice the timing. As Catherine's public life began to change, the arrangement of rings on her hand changed with it. Her first official engagement after completing chemotherapy came in October, when she traveled with William to Southport to meet bereaved families and members of the community after the terrible attack there that summer. Catherine wore delicate gold fern earrings by Catherine Zoraida. The fern has long been recognized as a symbol of endurance, resilience, and renewal. And while these earrings had been in her jewelry box long before her illness, reaching for them on this specific day felt deeply intentional. It was the perfect, quiet message of strength, both for her own difficult return and for the grieving community she was there to support. By November, at the Festival of Remembrance, we saw her step back into a more formal, respectful silhouette. She wore the beautiful Collingwood pearl drop earrings that once belonged to Princess Diana, paired with her own, very modern pearl pendant by Monica Vinader, and finished the look with the badge of the Fleet Air Arm. In one very restrained group, she managed to honor her royal inheritance, stay true to her personal style, and respectfully mark her military duty. Then came the state visit from Qatar on 3 December, and this is where the scale of Catherine's public role visibly began to expand. She joined William to greet the Emir and Sheikha Jawahar, taking part in the formal daytime welcome. For this moment, she reached for heavy royal history, wearing pieces that belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. She chose the Bahrain pearl drop earrings, made with pearls given to the then Princess Elizabeth for her wedding in 1947, and paired them with the 4-row Japanese pearl choker. Both Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana had worn these pieces, and Catherine herself had chosen them for the funerals of Prince Philip and the late Queen. And importantly, her famous sapphire engagement ring was finally back on her hand. However, this was not yet Catherine's return to a state banquet. She participated in the daytime program, but did not attend the grand evening dinner. And honestly, this makes perfect sense. From the outside, state banquets just look like glittering parties, but in reality, they are incredibly demanding, hours-long events requiring immense stamina. Catherine's return was never going to be an overnight switch. It was careful, gradual, and beautifully measured. She was taking on exactly what she could comfortably handle. First the Buckingham Palace balcony, then Wimbledon, a few meaningful community engagements, and now a formal daytime state welcome draped in the late Queen's pearls. The banquets, with their heavy gowns, sashes, and tiaras, would come, but all in good time. Then, just a few weeks later, at her Christmas carol service, the mood softened beautifully. For this evening, she chose the Amberley earrings by Mulberry, lovely, irregular Baroque pearls suspended from lock-shaped links. These were contemporary earrings that anyone watching could have realistically bought for themselves, though, as you might expect, they sold out almost instantly. It's such a lovely reminder that Catherine's jewelry box comfortably holds both the heirlooms and the high street finds of a modern woman. The new year began with what was perhaps her most personal engagement of all. On 14 January 2025, Catherine returned to the Royal Marsden Hospital, the very place where she had received her treatment. It was a day to thank the staff, speak with patients, and share the wonderful news that she was finally in remission. She and William also took on a new role as joint patrons of the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation Trust. A hospital ward, especially one where you've just fought the hardest battle of your life, is hardly the place for flashy diamonds or grand royal statements. And Catherine's styling reflected that perfectly. She chose pieces that were elegant but wonderfully understated. For this visit, she wore classic Cartier Trinity earrings, a 1924 design made of interlocking bands in yellow, white, and rose gold. Her large sapphire engagement ring was also absent that day, replaced once again by that delicate group of slender bands. By now, this was beginning to look less like a temporary substitution and more like a practical, comfortable new way of wearing her rings for these more intimate, hands-on visits. This Royal Marsden visit also gave her later choices in important context. As Catherine herself acknowledged, hearing the word remission did not mean that everything immediately returned to normal. Recovery had its own physical and emotional demands, and that distinction would become even more central when she spoke more openly later in the year. In February, during a visit to Pontypridd in Wales, she wore gold hoop earrings with removable garnet drops by Spells of Love, a small Welsh jewelry brand. The choice worked on two very simple levels. The maker was Welsh, appropriate for the Princess of Wales, and garnet is Catherine's birthstone for January. Please keep those little garnet drops in mind. They appear modest beside the royal pearls and diamonds, but they will eventually travel much farther than a palace reception. In May 2025, at a Buckingham Palace garden party, Catherine reached for one of the most deeply personal pairs of diamond earrings she owns. The Robinson Pelham earrings were commissioned by her parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, as a wedding gift. Catherine first wore them at Westminster Abbey in 2011, where their design of oak leaves and suspended acorns beautifully echoed the newly created Middleton family coat of arms. The 3 acorns represent the Middleton children, Catherine, Pippa, and James, a nod to West Berkshire, where the family grew up surrounded by oak trees. But beyond family history, the oak is also a universal, long-established symbol of quiet endurance, deep roots, and unyielding strength. That connection felt especially poignant on this particular afternoon. Although a royal garden party brings together thousands of guests, among those Catherine and William met was the family of Liz Hatton, the young photographer Catherine had welcomed to Windsor the previous autumn. Liz died from cancer just weeks after that meeting. We cannot know whether Catherine chose her wedding earrings with this conversation in mind, but the juxtaposition is deeply moving. As she spent time with a grieving family, she was wearing a gift from her own parents, shaped around an emblem of family roots and strength. There is another small detail on the Middleton coat of arms that seems especially striking in retrospect. 2 slim chevrons in the center refer to hills, mountains, and the outdoor pursuits the family has always enjoyed together. Back in 2011, that was simply a lovely piece of personal biography. But 15 years later, as Catherine navigated life after her illness, mountains were about to take on a completely new and far more literal meaning in her story. Before we reached them, however, there was an important visit to an oncology center in Colchester on 2nd July, 2025. Catherine spoke frankly about life after treatment, describing it as a roller coaster and discussing the difficulty of finding a new normal. These were not the words of someone presenting recovery as a neat, perfect ending. They acknowledged the untidy, complicated period that follows the hospital appointments and public announcements. For this deeply honest conversation, her jewelry choices were just as grounded. She reached once again for her Cartier Trinity earrings, the exact same pair she wore to the Royal Marsden Hospital when she first announced her remission. Along with the earrings, she wore the Ari Bali necklace, a fine chain with a small garnet positioned above a gold disc. Once again, we see the garnet, her January birthstone. We had actually seen this necklace before, back in 2022, in a cheerful family video of Catherine baking with her children. The gold disc on the necklace can be engraved, and photographs suggest that Catherine's carries an inscription. But it has never been readable enough for anyone to identify. By the summer of 2025, a beautiful pattern had emerged in Catherine's personal jewelry. But perhaps the most touching detail was happening right on her left hand. Her collection of rings was quietly expanding, forming a new combination that clearly holds deep personal meaning for her. For years, Catherine's ring stack was incredibly consistent and easy to recognize. First came her traditional Welsh gold wedding band. Resting just above it was, of course, the engagement ring William gave her in 2010, the breathtaking 12-carat oval sapphire surrounded by 14 diamonds that once belonged to his mother. And alongside those two, she has long worn a delicate diamond eternity band, generally identified as Anushka's Eclipse design. It appeared shortly after Prince George was born in 2013, and the timing has always made it feel like a sweet, lasting tribute to motherhood. Then, the balance of that familiar stack gently shifted with the addition of a brand new sapphire and diamond band. G. Collins & Sons later confirmed that it was a bespoke piece created especially for Catherine. One lovely theory in the press suggested it was a gift from William to mark the end of her chemotherapy, and its prominent appearance in her beautiful September video certainly made that feel possible. However, the exact occasion it celebrates remains a private family detail. What is undeniably true is that this new ring serves as a wonderfully comfortable, everyday alternative to her massive engagement ring. As jewelry expert Lauren Kina pointed out, A slim eternity band like this is a brilliant addition to her collection. It maintains the sentimental sapphire and diamond theme, but its low profile makes it so much easier to wear. As stunning as Diana's sapphire is, it is a significant, high-set piece that is truly better suited for more formal royal engagements. A slim band, on the other hand, is perfect for walks in the woods, hospital visits, or simply being at home. And if anyone thought this new band was meant to permanently replace her historic engagement ring, Catherine answered that beautifully without saying a single word. At Wimbledon on July 12, 2025, she showed us that these pieces can coexist perfectly. For the very first time, Catherine wore the large sapphire engagement ring and the new sapphire and diamond band together. Combined with her Welsh gold wedding ring and the older diamond eternity band, they formed one stunning, clearly visible stack of four. I absolutely love this visual statement. It quietly proved that she isn't leaving her past behind or rejecting the weight of her role. She is simply adding her own new chapters to that legacy. Just a couple of months later, on September 16th, at the funeral of Catherine, Duchess of Kent, royal watchers noticed that the stack had grown once again. This time, observers counted 5 rings. Nestled among the familiar 4 was another delicate, narrow band, usually described as platinum or diamond set, though it hasn't been definitively identified. Naturally, the guesswork started all over again. Was it an anniversary gift? Another eternity band? While we might never get an official answer, I honestly think that little bit of mystery is what makes her changing ring stacks so fascinating to watch. To me, it is absolutely clear that each and every one of these rings is incredibly dear to Catherine, with every single band carrying its own private, meaningful story. She doesn't seem to follow a strict rule with them anymore. Sometimes the grand sapphire engagement ring is there, and sometimes it isn't. 4 bands become 5, and then gently return to 4, beautifully blending older family milestones with newer, unexplained additions. Only 4 days before that Wimbledon appearance, another part of Catherine's jewelry life had returned on a much grander scale. On 8 July 2025, she attended the state banquet held at Windsor Castle for President Emmanuel Macron of France. It was her first state banquet since treatment, and her first appearance in a tiara since the diplomatic reception in December 2023. For this return, she chose Queen Mary's Lover's Knot tiara. Gerard made it in 1913 for Queen Mary, who wanted a version of a lover's knot tiara once owned by her grandmother, Princess Augusta, Duchess of Cambridge. The design combines diamond arches, knotted motifs, and swinging pearl drops. Queen Elizabeth II wore it and later lent it to Diana, with whom it became especially closely associated. Catherine first wore the tiara publicly in 2015. Over the following decade, it became her most frequently used and recognizable tiara. For the French banquet, she returned to a piece she knew well and had already made part of her official image. The rest of the jewelry deserves proper attention too. On her ears were the Gradual chandelier earrings. Cartier created the earrings in London for Dame Margaret Gradual after the First World War. They began as simple diamond drops, were lengthened in 1922, and reached their present form in 1929. Their many shapes have been described as a lexicon of modern diamond cuts. Gradual left her collection to Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, in 1942. 5 years later, the Queen Mother gave the earrings to her elder daughter as a wedding present. They became favorites of Queen Elizabeth II, who wore them at gala performances, dinners, and state visits throughout her reign. Catherine first wore them in 2023 at the celebrations for the wedding of Crown Prince Hussein of Jordan. At the French banquet, she combined them with Diana's 3-row pearl bracelet. On her red Givenchy gown, she wore the sash and star of the Royal Victorian Order and the family orders of Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III. The designer of the gown, Sarah Burton, was also the woman behind Catherine's Alexander McQueen wedding dress. The tiara connected Queen Mary, Elizabeth II, and Diana. The earrings carried the Gradual bequest and Elizabeth's long reign. The bracelet recalled Diana, and the dress returned Catherine to her wedding designer. She assembled different parts of royal and personal history for her first banquet back, without requiring them to deliver one grand declaration. 10 weeks later, on 17 September, Catherine attended the state banquet for the President of the United States. Again, she wore the lover's knot tiara, this time with a gold lace coat and silk gown by Philippa Lepley. The earrings were Queen Elizabeth II's diamond frame earrings, first lent to Catherine in 2017 and worn by her regularly since then. The repetition of the tiara is important, but not because it proves that all difficulty had vanished. It shows that the French banquet was not an isolated ceremonial appearance. Catherine was returning to the working rhythm of state visits, and the lover's knot remained part of that rhythm. Then, in December, she did something jewelry watchers had not expected. For the German state banquet at Windsor Castle on 3 December 2025, Catherine left the familiar pearl tiara in the vault and appeared in Queen Victoria's Indian circlet, also widely known as the Oriental circlet. It had not been worn in public for 20 years. Prince Albert designed the circlet for Queen Victoria after being inspired by Indian jewels displayed at the Great Exhibition of 1851. Its Mughal-style arches and lotus forms were unlike the more conventional European tiaras in Victoria's collection. The original design used diamonds and opals, one of Albert's favorite stones. Its history, however, was not straightforward. Some of the diamonds used in the tiara had come from jewels belonging to Queen Charlotte. After a long dispute over the Hanoverian inheritance, those stones had to be returned to the Hanoverian branch of the family, and the circlet was altered. Later, Queen Alexandra replaced the opals with rubies, creating the red and diamond appearance we know today. The circlet became a great favorite of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Queen Elizabeth II, by contrast, wore it publicly only once, for a banquet in Malta in 2005. After that, it disappeared from view until Catherine brought it back 2 decades later. With it, she wore a delicate pair of diamond chandelier earrings lent to her by Queen Elizabeth II shortly after her wedding in 2011. These are not the enormous Gradual chandeliers from the French banquet. They are a lighter, more linear pair, associated directly with Elizabeth's collection and familiar on Catherine since the early years of her marriage. In her will, Queen Victoria specifically left this circlet as an heirloom to be worn only by future queens. That small historical detail makes Catherine's choice for the December banquet feel really significant. After returning to her familiar, tried-and-true tiara in July and September, this felt like a natural but very confident step forward. She showed that she is ready for bolder choices, gently acknowledging the weight of her future role. By the summer of 2026, the story moved away from banquet tables and palace corridors. On 4 June, Catherine visited the Christie Cancer Centre in Manchester. Her jewelry spoke directly to the city: small gold bee earrings and a lapis lazuli pendant by Astley Clark. The worker bee has represented Manchester's industrious character and communal spirit for generations. Catherine had worn the earrings during an earlier visit to the city's memorial in 2022 and explained then that they were a tribute to Manchester. The blue lapis necklace also repeated a stone she had chosen on that earlier, deeply emotional visit. This was regional dressing in its clearest form. The jewelry acknowledged the place and the people she had come to meet. Yet, only a few weeks later, another pair of regional earrings would accompany her through Scotland, England, and Wales in a way no one could have anticipated. On 27 and 28 June, Catherine completed the National Three Peaks Challenge. Within 24 hours, she climbed Ben Nevis in Scotland, Scafell Pike in England, and Ir Wydfa in Wales. The route involved around 23 miles of walking and more than 3,000 meters of ascent. She undertook the challenge to raise funds for the Royal Marsden Cancer Charity and to draw attention to holistic care alongside clinical treatment. Her own words gave the event its meaning. Cancer doesn't just affect the body, it changes how you think and feel and profoundly affects every aspect of life. I know this personally, and that the journey through and beyond treatment requires more than medicine alone. When we look at what she wore for this climb, it brings together several threads of our story. On her ears were those same Spells of Love garnet hoops we discussed during her visit to Pontypridd. She has actually had these earrings in her collection for several years, but to me, it feels incredibly symbolic that she chose this exact pair for the ascent. Garnet is her own January birthstone, and I love the thought that her personal stone was there, giving her a little extra strength during such a grueling physical test. And since Spells of Love is a small Welsh brand, wearing them to conquer the highest peak in Wales feels like a very warm, thoughtful nod to the country. But what really caught my eye in the photographs from the climb was her left hand. Along with several of the slender bands from her changing stack, her large sapphire engagement ring was right there on her finger. Now, a massive 12-carat stone is certainly not the most obvious or practical choice for mountain climbing. As we noticed earlier in the year, she frequently left it behind in favor of a comfortable, low-profile ring stack for everyday life and hospital visits. The fact that she decided not to take it off for this extremely demanding journey tells us a lot. It clearly holds such a deep, grounding significance for her that she simply wanted it with her, every step of the way to the summit. And then there was the bracelet. Against the waterproof clothing, hiking poles, and rocky landscape, a narrow woven band in blue, green, and white appeared on her wrist. Reports later identified it as a friendship bracelet made by Princess Charlotte to celebrate her mother's Three Peaks Challenge. There is something incredibly touching about this small addition to her look. William, George, Charlotte, and Louis met her at the end, together with Carol and Michael Middleton and her brother James. James had joined her for part of the challenge and later wrote that they had talked about climbing mountains while Catherine was in hospital. The family photographs released afterwards included an emotional embrace between Catherine and Charlotte. The bracelet continued to appear long after the challenge. Catherine wore it during a visit to Evelina London Children's Hospital, then at a charity polo match and at other summer appearances. It is such a sweet, grounded detail, a quiet reminder that sometimes the most precious things a person can wear are simply the ones made by the hands of their children. Before we close the lid on Catherine's jewelry box, there is one final, dazzling addition that we absolutely have to talk about. Over the last year, a striking new pair of ruby and diamond drop earrings has quietly become a staple in her wardrobe. While we have seen Catherine wear rubies before, most notably a necklace she debuted in Warsaw back in 2017, these specific earrings, featuring a brilliant central ruby surrounded by a halo of diamonds, appear to be a newer addition, widely linked by experts to the British jewelers G. Collins and Sons. What is so fascinating is just how often, and to what kinds of events, she has chosen to wear them recently. We first noticed them at the events marking the 80th anniversary of VE Day in May 2025. They subsequently appeared at the daytime welcome for the American state visit and on Armistice Day. But they truly took center stage in the summer of 2026 when she paired them with her older ruby necklace for a Cancer Research UK reception, and then wore the pairing again just a few weeks later in the Royal Box at Wimbledon. Naturally, whenever a new piece appears this frequently, we can't help but wonder about the meaning behind it. Many royal observers immediately pointed out a beautiful family connection. The ruby is the July birthstone of her eldest son, Prince George. Knowing how Catherine loves to keep her children close through her jewelry, this is a very lovely and likely possibility. But there might be an even deeper layer here, especially given where she chose to wear them. Historically, this precious stone is traditionally associated with courage, protection, vitality, and endurance. To me, that is such a fitting and powerful symbolism for an event dedicated to advancing oncology research. Looking back at this extraordinary period, Catherine's jewelry box tells a very clear and deeply moving story. We don't need to search for hidden codes because her choices speak beautifully for themselves. By tracing her journey, we can see exactly where she drew her strength from and what she preferred to keep close. The sweet memories of her children, the comforting gifts from her parents, and her enduring connection to William. We saw her honor the places she represents, and ultimately pay a profound tribute to history by embracing the magnificent jewels of the royal women who came before her. It is a perfect, graceful balance between the personal anchors that ground her and the historical weight of her destiny. If you enjoyed following this journey with me, please support the video with a like and subscribe to the channel. I would also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which part of Catherine's jewelry story stayed with you the most? Was it the diamond acorns from her parents? The changing stack of rings? The debut of Queen Victoria's circlet? Or perhaps Charlotte's woven bracelet on the mountain path? Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Jewels may be silent, but their stories remain alive as long as we pause to listen to them.